Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm Mark Graban, and my guest today is Manisha Thakor. She is a 25-year veteran of the financial services industry, so she's seen firsthand the downfalls of being trapped in what she calls the cult of money, and I think we'll be able to hear more about that today. She is a chartered financial analyst. She's a certified financial planner. So before I tell you more, I think that's the end of the letters and the acronyms. Manisha, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Oh, Mark, thank you so much for having me.
So let me tell you just a little bit more about Manisha's background. And I don't know if some of this will be in her favorite mistake story, but she went from, I'm sorry to be the one saying this out loud. This is your bio, your words, from a failed marriage to nearly working yourself to death twice. Manisha's learned the hard way how expensive the pursuit of money really is. So using an approach that she calls MoneyZen, Manisha's found her way back to financial well-being, and she uses this framework to help others do the same. She's the author of books including On My Own 2 Feet and Get Financially Naked, How to Talk Money with Your Honey. That's a fun title, and you can learn more about her on her website, MoneyZen.com. So I think we'll have a chance to talk about some of these financial ideas and tips and mistakes. But first off, Manisha, as we always do here, thinking back to your career and the things you've done, do you have, what would you say is your favorite mistake?
Oh, yes. And I can picture the story around it so vividly.
Yeah.
So the punchline, which will make more sense when I finish the story, is my favorite mistake is when I realized I was confusing wealth with wealth. So let me tell you about that. This was back in the day when I was still working in the corporate world. I was 49 years old and working for a wealth management firm. And I had a prospective client who was coming in, who I knew personally, and she was deeply private about herself, her money. I knew we could help her a lot. And the experience of the firm I was working for, of talking to new clients, was to engage in a process called discovery, where you asked a lot of personal questions and understood the person's concerns. And then in a second meeting, you'd come back with them, hopefully having felt comfortable enough giving you their financial data with an overview addressing their concerns so that they could test drive you before hiring you. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, my friend is never going to share this information, but I want her to see the power. So I went ahead and had the meeting done based on my financials and the interview done as if I were the client. So it was all kind of compressed into one meeting. And as we went through and we were talking about the money that I had, how I had earned it, what it meant to me, what I wanted to do with it, and my fear of running out. And so we had created the analyses to show, if I lived X years and I spent Y amount, what are my odds of running out of money?
Yeah.
And I just started bawling, like gut-wrenching bawling, because I realized I had spent my whole life accumulating wealth, WEALTH. I had more than enough to go do whatever I wanted to do in life. But I had no wealth, WELLTH. And it was just this shocker of a moment. And I look back and I think, I'm not stupid. I went to Harvard Business School. I did my undergrad at Wellesley. I've been blessed to have had a good education. How did I miss this? And that's what really has caused my life lately to pivot in directions that I never would have expected. And so that eye-opening moment of really connecting the life's energy that it took, that it cost me to earn that money, and juxtaposing that against the really feeble uses I had put that money towards, other than kind of arm's length charitable giving, but not doing anything to really enhance my experience of life, was a big, big wake up call.
So I'm glad you clarified that, because as you were telling the story, I was thinking, I didn't want to jump in. Like, did I mishear you wealth and health, but I see the play on words with the spelling of wealth, feeling well, living well. Well, maybe the inconsequential question: did you get the client after this this kind of breaking down, bawling, or was she?
You know what?
What happened?
Actually, I ended up retiring from the corporate world. So she didn't become my client, but she did become the firm's client.
So it wasn't quite a Jerry Maguire walkout. It was different circumstances going back to that movie. But when you realized the thing that made you cry, just to clarify, was not being short on retirement savings, or realizing you had almost overaccumulated, and that was the thing that upset you, right?
Oh, completely. We ran all sorts. I live a frugal life, and that's how I accumulated enough to be in a good financial position. And as we ran through every possible scenario, like I live to 110 and I spend 2.5 times what I'm spending right now, and I assume inflation is 5% a year, I'm still fine, and so it's just that, that really deep stress testing of the numbers and wondering what is inside me that keeps having this feeling of it's never enough. It's never enough. And so that was a big wake up impetus for me.
It sounds like it was quite the epiphany then of, I'm sure you get financial statements in the mail, but you're not getting the clarity of the analysis that you went through that said, oh, I've got more than enough. Good problem to have.
And here's the irony is, I run those analyses, or I did when I was in the corporate world all the time. Like I knew that data, but it wasn't until I linked my personal story, kind of going back to being, a mixed race child of immigrants. So, and what I went through growing up in a small town and where there were no non-white individuals. And there were so many different things that I had gone through in my life to earn that money and get to that point. And it was in talking about and honoring all of that personal journey, struggle, learning. That was the aha. I knew the numbers. The numbers were not new. It was just articulating the human story and also the cost and how much I had sacrificed in terms of my marriage. I don't have kids. There were a number of things personally that I did not handle the way I would have liked to because of my incessant feeling it's never enough. It's never enough.
So, there was that, rather sudden kind of discovery of the situation. And then did retirement give you the space to reflect a little bit more on what had been missing, or if there had been, regrets or things that you would then try to maybe make some adjustments around?
So I'm kind of stubborn, Mark, and I feel a bit like I'm one of those gigantic cargo ships that maneuvers and turns slowly. So not long after that meeting, I became mysteriously very ill. I started to have these red, blotchy, swollen spots that were so painful. My scalp felt like it was on fire. And then finally, when I could barely keep my eyes open, no joke, longer than 3 or 4 hours a day in the office. I was literally like slinking off to the milk pumping room to crash in with the new mothers and sleep on the floor. I had finally went to the doctor when my fever approached 104. And they ran a ton of different lab tests and basically found out that, I had Epstein-Barr, which is, you can think of it as mono on steroids, but also I had hyper levels of inflammation in my body to the point where those levels typically indicated some type of tumor or malignancy. And we went through a ton of testing and we couldn't find anything. But this systemic inflammation in my body, in retrospect, I can see very much my body was attacking itself. It was a classic autoimmune reaction. And I ended up having to take a 9-month leave of absence. It took 9 months for me to get my health back to the point where I could actually stay awake for a normal work day.
Wow.
And so I went back to work. And then, that was March, right before COVID got going, and 2000. And within a couple months, several people close to me passed away. Only one from COVID, 2 others of other circumstances. But the combination of all of that together just really hit home that it was time for me to focus on WELLTH.
You made some other adjustments. You talked about, you'd made some arm's length donations. Did you get involved in some causes or some organizations where you're finding more fulfillment and, let's say, some more direct participation?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I have always been really, really passionate about, there are 2 areas, women's economic empowerment and mental health awareness. And on the economic empowerment front, I joined the board of the National Endowment for Financial Education, which has been an amazing experience. It is a nonprofit that is focused on really helping change the ecosystem and bring together all of the varied constituents across the country that are trying on their own to bring financial education into schools, into the workplace, and so forth. And so that has been deeply fulfilling. And then on a local level, I live in Portland, Oregon. We have a charitable giving group of women, and everybody puts $1,000 in the pot, and it's grown so much. We now have over 500 women, so the pot's got $500,000 in it, and we donated across 5 different categories, one of which has to do with mental illness, and so I focused my efforts in there. And that has been deeply rewarding, but I kind of felt like I was checking off boxes. It's like, okay, I'm retired, and so I'm going to learn a language, and I'm going to travel, and I'm going to do volunteer work. And after about 2 or 3 months, I felt like I had another song in me that was meant to come out. And all through my corporate career, I've always, well, at least for the last 15 of my corporate career years, I've had a side gig, which I call MoneyZen, and that's the entity under which I wrote the books, and I do a lot of talking, teaching, speaking about the basics of personal finance for women. And by the time I had, quote, semi-retired from the corporate world, I was tired of talking about personal finance 101 tips. And all of this stuff stirred up together, re-energized me and made me realize that I wanted to help people who I'm now calling it needed help to stop striving yourself crazy, which is what I was doing to address this kind of never enough feeling around money and career and success. And so I've been working on a framework to try and help people. And I was very fortunate to get a book contract this fall with HarperCollins to put out a book that is, it'll be my 3rd book. And this one really is focused on helping people stop striving themselves crazy.
Yeah. And so these people who are striving themselves crazy or working themselves to death, or they're caught up in, I think it's a vivid phrase you use, the cult of money.
Yeah.
Is there? I don't know how much I'm going to try to torture the analogy. There's no cult leader per se, I guess, or like how do people get caught up in that cult of money? How do you describe that?
Yeah. So that is the $1 million question. And it's really been a function of three broad factors. The first is that we are not taught financial education, and unlike prior generations, we have much easier access to credit that now comes to us with increasingly more complex fine print. Mm-hmm. So essentially, we've been given a financial Uzi with no instructions, and we can shoot ourselves in the foot.
Yeah.
The second factor is that we are bombarded by unrealistic media images. So, I mean, pick any police, medical, legal drama on TV, and you'll see, and I'm particularly attuned to this with the female characters, but it's with the male characters as well. Like you watch a female paralegal going into the office, and she has completely frizz-free hair, even though the show takes place in New York in the summer. And, she's obviously had a fresh mani-pedi because she types a lot for work and her nails are perfect. And you look at her outfit and the fabric and the fit of the clothes, it's clearly custom tailored. And then you see her apartment and it's, unbelievable. And yet she's earning a paralegal salary. Yeah. And what I have observed is that male or female in so many of the shows we watch, if you had to actually pay for the lifestyle being depicted by that character, you'd have to earn probably 25% more than the jobs those characters are depicted as having actually pay. And so our perception of what is normal is completely off. Yeah. And in such a subtle way that you don't always notice it right away. And then, of course, social media has put it all on steroids because, nobody puts the photo of the vacation part where mom and dad were giving each other the silent treatment and the kids were having a food fight. You just get the kumbaya photo. And so we have these, you stir together those three pieces, and it's really easy to find yourself in a cult of money. You don't have to have an Ivy League MBA or work in finance for this to happen to you. It's happening everywhere, which is what's so concerning to me. Yeah. Is so many of us, we've got cognitive overload, and the message that seems to be predominant in so many people's minds, not everyone, but so many people's minds, is this: never enough. I got to keep going. I got to work harder. There's all this opportunity. I should take advantage of it. So, I mean, that's been going on for a while. When you talk about the expectations, what's portrayed. One of the criticisms of the show Friends, going back to the 90s, was that, oh, come on, these New York apartments that they were in, way too big, would have been way too, like, if that even exists, would have been way too expensive. When I was that age and I lived in New York and I had a good job, I was working at an investment banking firm. I was living in like a 400 square foot fourth floor walk up, and I was happy to have found that place. A friend of mine from college who was working at one of the major banks, and I remember his office was in the World Trade Center when I visited him there in the late 90s. And he was living in a really small apartment with 4 or 5 guys who all worked in financial services, and they worked so much they were never home. So I guess that made it they could cycle through the bed easier. That's part of that. I guess it's just part of that striving lifestyle. But when you talk about wealth, WELLTH, that it seems like one of the challenges here. I'm curious what you think is that wealth is not as easily measured as WEALTH wealth. You get financial statement sent to you, or you go log in. How do you? I mean, not that everything has to be quantified, but how do you gauge that sense of personal well-being? So, I have found, and again, I'm in this period of exploration. I would liken the book that I'm working on to Dan Harris's 10% Happier, where he had an anxiety and panic attack on national TV and then wanted to step back and figure out how it happened. So I had this moment where I realized I was focused on wealth instead of wealth.
Mhm.
And now I'm stepping back and trying to understand, how did I become this kind of person? Where did those years go? What can I do to help other people not make the same mistake? And what can I do going forward to enjoy myself? And right now, where I am is identifying more the triggers or the characteristics that help you see that you may have this problem. And so what I have come to find is that while I originally thought the root issue was something like what I experienced, which was an over identification of self-worth and net worth, literally conflating my value as a human with the size of my bank account, to a problem that is much more widespread. So I just got back from yoga earlier today, and my yoga instructor told me that there's huge competition in the yoga world. Like, how many students fill up your class? Do you have any students that want to take privates with you? Was talking to an academic friend of mine, and she was saying, oh my gosh, we totally compete. Our net worth is how many papers we have published and conferences we've been invited to speak at. And so I realized there are so many net worth varies by the orbit in which you live, but the pain of associating your self-worth with your net worth, despite how you define net worth, is very real, very widespread. And to me, the beacon, if you will, is that you feel like you're on some kind of never-ending treadmill where you're doing everything that you're supposed to do. You got good grades, you worked hard, you got married, you have 2 kids, you've got the dog, and you're not happy.
Yeah.
And another test I use is, I ask people, like, can you remember what you did 3 days ago? And I mean, most people literally cannot remember. The days are just this blur, unless they were on vacation, in which case they could say, yeah, we went to this restaurant or we saw that museum. And I find that fascinating that people can remember what they've done on different days of a vacation. But they can't remember in the week they are working.
Yeah.
And so that to me is the signal.
It sounds like a sign that someone is sort of just sleepwalking through their week, through their year. If it's so indistinct that you can't remember a couple days ago what was different about that day.
Yes, and I think what worries me is I thought for a long time I was, alone in this, that I had just kind of a whacked out, bent set of values. But as I talk to people, while it doesn't always manifest itself in the cult of money the way it did with me, there is a cult of never enough, like this pressure that you need to either have more, do more, or be more. And so to come full circle back to your question, like what does WELLTH look like? I would argue it is this combination of having financial health, because if you don't have financial health, you're so stressed, you're not going to enjoy anything else. But it's having that combination of financial health and emotional wealth, with the focus on building financial health so you can have emotional wealth. And I think that interplay needs more discourse.
So one other area it might require more discourse or insights for couples. So your book, and it's a catchy title, "Get Financially Naked: How to Talk Money with Your Honey." I mean, are there some common money mistakes that you see couples making?
Oh, for sure. I mean, the first one is not talking about money before becoming a permanent couple, whether that means moving in together or getting married. I am blown away by the number of couples who don't know each other's income. I mean, shocking kinds of lack of communication around money. And so I always say that, you go to the doctor, you get some basic annual blood work done. And there's some basic annual financial blood work that you want to do as a couple, at least knowing what is your household income in aggregate. You don't need to break it down into minutia. Just look at how much went out in credit cards, how much you wrote in checks, how much you took out in ATMs, and have a lump sum of what went out that year. And hopefully there's a positive difference.
Right.
Know your credit scores, but then most importantly, come up with some rules. I call it create your financial three-way. And what I encourage is every couple to have 3 buckets, yours, mine, and ours. And you get to decide how they get funded. Some couples want everything in ours, 100%. Other couples have different guidelines on how they want to put money into yours or mine. And increasingly, as people get married later in life, or it's second marriages and their kids involved, the complexity of people's financial situations when they come together is sufficiently strong that absent these conversations, there can be huge hurt feelings, anger, fights. If you have your money combined together, I always suggest that that you decide a number that if either party wants to spend more than that, you agree you're going to talk to each other, and that you pick a number that each one of you is allowed to spend or do whatever the heck you want with each month, no questions asked. And those 2 bumper guards really seem to help with maybe 80% of the arguments. And then for the yours and mine, I also suggest that when there are big income disparities, one of the things I'm noticing is a lot of women are becoming the primary breadwinners. I have many female friends that are earning 2x, 3 times what their spouse is earning. And then that creates an awkward situation, and they don't want to make their spouse feel emasculated, so they don't bring up the topic. And when there are those disparities, to talk about how you want to handle them. It doesn't sound romantic to talk about a pro rata split of vacation costs, but if it keeps each party from feeling that they can truly enjoy the vacation because it meets their financial sensibilities, it's a really good investment. So talking about those kinds of really awkward divisions of how you want to handle, or the rules that you want to create for yourselves, I find is life-changing for a lot of relationships. Yeah.
And I haven't had a chance to look at the book. Is it full of financial double entendres, like a financial freeway?
No, I ran out of them. They come to me when I'm swimming. I don't know why. I should have done more laps. There'd be more of them in there, but
yeah. So Manisha, with MoneyZen, can you talk a little bit about that? And again, our guest is Manisha Thakor. Her website's MoneyZen.com. What are different ways you work with individuals, or who are you
so
working
in
with
this
there?
second chapter of my life, I have shifted from working with individuals to a B2C setup. So I teach. And I typically work with corporations or increasingly retreat centers and wellness centers. So what I have found is a lot of corporations are doing in-house financial wellness programming to help their employees. So I do a lot of teaching through that, which is wonderful, because if I can teach for a Fortune 500 company that I do a couple of sessions and then they keep them on their internal networks, I can reach so many more people than if I was working one-on-one. And then what's heartened me is I'm also seeing like spiritual retreat centers, the Omega Institute, 1440, a lot of these wonderful places now offering this content. So I teach there, and then I speak. And I've really tried to focus in at this stage of my career on speaking events where I can hit the greatest number of people. And so usually it's industry organizations, trade groups. I just finished speaking to a large group of female reconstructive surgeons, and really trying to help in that sort of way. And then also doing brand ambassadorship around products or services that I feel passionate about. And I'm really picky about those, because if I wouldn't use them myself, I'm not going to talk about them. But that's the way in which I have been working. But I want to still help individuals. And so on my website, I really take care I have a tab called Financial Wisdom, and I have the common different areas, everything from you're getting married to you're struggling with debt, to you want to learn about investing. And I constantly am curating what I think are the best resources to teach yourself about these topic areas. And then I have one online course that I do pro bono. The Omega Institute runs it, and I teach it, and all the proceeds, the tuition goes to Omega for scholarship funds. And people have taken it, say it's life transformative and or transforming, and it mimics the on-campus in-person workshop that I used to do pre-COVID. So that's those are the ways in which I'm able to help individuals. And I'm on social media, and I have a monthly newsletter. I don't sell anything because I am, my MoneyZen business is now B2C, but B2B, but I love sharing information. And particularly as I go down this journey on this new book of trying to figure out how to help people meld financial health with emotional wealth, really helping to define what are the elements under each of those buckets. And so as I'm researching that and talking to industry experts and reading journal articles and so forth, I'm sharing the best of in the newsletter. And I feel like that's one of the biggest ways that I can help as many individuals as possible at this point.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, thank you, Manisha, for being here with us, for sharing your story and your reflections and what you've learned. Hopefully that prompts others to think about their own balance of wealth and well-being, and step back and maybe look to some of your books or your website as a resource. So again, our guest today has been Manisha Thakor. Her website's MoneyZen.com. You can find her books on Amazon. And the new book, again, you said is The Fall. I know publishing can be slow. It's
Actually, which year? It's the fall of 2023. So in the interim, in the next week or two, I'll have going live on my website a quiz. So if you go to MoneyZen.com, you'll see it up in the top bar. It says quiz, and it's really fun. You can take it, and it tells you where you fall on the spectrum of financial health and emotional wealth. And depending on where you are, I'll be able to share content that is specific to your situation up until the time the book comes. So definitely go to MoneyZen.com and check out the quiz. It's fun.
Cool. I will do that. So thank you, Manisha, for sharing that. Good luck with the book and happy writing. And thank you again for being here today.
Mark, thanks for having me.
Thanks.